first step, as I touched on, is again a Microsoft tool, so that will sit across your infrastructure, whether it's physical tin sitting in a broom cupboard somewhere, whether it's servers or blades in a rack, Hyper-V, VMware, Linux, Windows, SQL, and it'll gather a lot of information just around the telemetry of your environment. So how much is this server being used? How much disk space is here? How much CPU is here? How much RAM? How much storage? And then it'll also go through and map out dependencies between systems. So making sure that when we are moving a workload, we know that, hey, we've got a web server and a database, probably would make sense to move both of those things at the same time. And then that will also furnish a bit of a report in terms of estimating what the cost would be to run some of those workloads up into Azure, so we can be a little bit more selective about what we're moving and when. Hybrid management, I like to start with Arc because it's such an easy win. I know everyone has probably a plethora of tools internally for managing backups, monitoring servers, when stuff is up, when stuff is down, patching, security, compliance, policy. Maybe you have some of those tools, maybe you have none of them. But Azure Arc is so simple to roll out, and it gives you so much visibility across all of your infrastructure, whether that is on-prem, in Azure, or in another cloud provider. And it enables you to be able to roll out standard security policies across your entire organization. And it doesn't matter where that stuff lives, right? And it also gives you a single pane of glass to manage all of those security policies and patches, updates, monitoring, and alerting. Why that's important for education is I was reading the Microsoft Defense report last week, and in Asia Pacific, education is the most attacked sector across APAC. Backup, BCP. I know I've had my struggles in the past with running LTO6 tape libraries, offsite backups, spending thousands of dollars on SANs and NASs and storage and bits and pieces. So another great quick win out of the Azure side of things is starting to migrate some of your backup solutions into Azure Backup, whether that's just plain old Azure Backup, taking images of VMs, all the way through to Azure Site Recovery, replicating something to another region or up into Azure. It can also be a good first step if you want to back stuff up into Azure. If you have a failure of your data center or the power goes out on-prem, it's nice and easy to be able to spin all of those resources back up in Azure rather than having to wait for somebody to drain all the water out of your server room, which has happened before. And we've had instances where we've had multi-terabyte VMs that we've restored in under 15 minutes rather than, sitting in a server room changing out tapes in a tape library for the next 3 days. Launchpad. So we kind of boiled down our Launchpad services to 3 standard tiers depending on how much people want to do. Understand that in education, IT teams are generally pretty small, right? Everyone's super busy, especially managing all the kids' devices as well as all your back-end infrastructure and your LMS system and your SMS system, as well as heaps of other initiatives that I know all schools have got going pretty much perpetually. So with our basic tier, we kind of split down in terms of some of the stuff we do and some of the stuff is the responsibility of the school. So you can take a little bit more ownership. Let's say you've got, some more time, or you want your internal IT team to take a little bit more ownership of the migration so they can learn and do the training and be a little bit more responsible for the environment, all the way through to sort of our advanced plan where we essentially just work with you to get whatever workloads you want to get moved up into Azure, and we do the whole process end to end for you. So you can kind of pick and choose where you sort of sit in that stack depending on time, budget, and then, how much you want to get you guys to get their hands dirty in Azure. And then step 5, migrating up into Azure. It's actually a lot more simple than I think most people would think, right? Microsoft has some absolutely amazing tools to be able to sort of pre-stage a lot of your environment up into Azure and make the cutover as easy as possible, whether that is, piping some of those out over the internet across an express route connection via a VPN and restoring some of those workloads into Azure. And again, it doesn't really matter where you're running it. Again, broom closet on old tin, VMware cluster, a Hyper-V server sitting around somewhere, blades, rack servers, doesn't really matter. There's a tool and there's a method to migrating pretty much all and any workloads you've got. And the way that we try to do this is we've got a bunch of standard operating procedures where we've documented like, hey, here's how we migrate a Hyper-V VM or a VMware VM. We'll work with you and your team. Sort of, you can take as much ownership of that as you want, right? Once we've done the discovery at the beginning, you'll know what workloads you have, how much that's going to cost in Azure, so on and so forth, and you can kind of pick and choose which workloads you want to move. Let's say there's maybe some more complex workloads that you maybe need some assistance with. We can definitely help do all of those migrations, or maybe there's just a really simple web server that you want to get you guys to pop up into Azure on Friday afternoon. We'll provide you the documentation, and in most cases, we'll generally handhold or over the shoulder the first couple of migrations up there. Help the team get really accustomed to Azure as a platform and get comfortable with the process so they can take, a lot more ownership and responsibility of some of those tasks.